Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68 and J&J Apparel. I'm your host, Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
I'm letting Charles go this time. I
Hey,
always
want
go
me to go
first.
first? It's bittersweet. I mean, it's hard to believe we're already at the last home game. That's why I wanted to represent Mark Sears, his last game in Coleman Coliseum. But also the sweet part of the fact is like I'm really excited to watch this team right now. I think this team is really improving. I think it's playing really good basketball. Um, Joey, I'm excited that you're going to be at the game. We're plus 38 when Joey attends games, and he's going to be there Wednesday. Um, Emily's going to be there with Joey as well. So as the young kids say, tied by 100. Like I'm feeling really good right now about Wednesday night.
Ugh. Yeah, no, I completely agree. As far as I really like the game of basketball that Alabama's playing right now. They're looking really good. I know we're about to get into the Tennessee loss, but um, I really don't. I mean, that's the best looking loss I've seen in quite a while. They played a really, really good game. It's one of those games where I know we say this a lot. Hats off to the opponent, but like genuinely, hats off to Tennessee in that game. This was a one of, if not the best game of the season so far. Both teams played ridiculously well. They were both very efficient. They both had pretty solid nights on both ends of the floor. I mean, they both shot over. I think Bama was in second at 42% from the floor. I think Tennessee 43. So both were very effective. It really just came down to the wire, literally, with that last buzzer beater. So you can't really get mad at a last loss like that. Obviously, it's against Tennessee, and obviously, which is of course a big rival, and it hurts to lose like that. But the fact that it came down to the wire, this is the loss that when they're making tournament seedings, this is going to be a loss that really is more of a tie. It's really not going to be as devastating as Alabama fans think it's going to be in the long run. So with that being said, we have two really, really crucial games that will probably affect seeding in these next two games. So looking forward to talking about those with you guys today.
Yeah, the Tennessee game was kind of billed for whatever reason as whoever loses is not going to be a one seed. Which I didn't really understand that logic by the broadcast, if I'm being completely honest. Um, but before I talk about the Tennessee game, I need to know what Emily's record is in Coleman Coliseum because that could determine, if the plus 38 is coming down or if it's going up, with you
I
guys in
think
attendance.
she with me. I think she's 2-1. I think, as far as I know, because she had never gone to a game prior to last year. Um, did we play? Who did we play? One of the home games I went to, we lost. I can't remember which one
We
it
lost
was.
to Clemson and Tennessee at
It
home.
was Clemson. We lost to Clemson. That was the one loss, but the other two games we went to were wins. So she's 2/3 wins right now. So hopefully it will be three by the time tomorrow night's over.
Well, we need it, but going into the Tennessee game, I think Alabama sat at a pretty good spot as far as their resume is concerned. I think they were the third overall team. Um, and them losing on a buzzer beater to Tennessee apparently moves them behind Houston, who Alabama beat, who I think is kind of tricking the computer models a little bit with some of their non-conference performance. And then obviously Tennessee, who you lose to, which I've seen some like schedule or resume comparisons, and in every single metric besides losses, Alabama is ahead of those two plus Florida. As far as the resume is concerned, but obviously, I think losses do have to be taken into consideration when you're doing seeding. But um, for Alabama, I mean, you played good for 39 minutes and 30 seconds of that game. Um, you outplayed Tennessee, and I think on the road you perform admirably. Um, it was one of those games where um, you look at the result and you execute it again for 39 minutes, and just 1 minute of the game was the reason why you lost the game. I think it was a poor coaching job at the end by Nate. I think I think it's just to be quite frank, I think it's unacceptable to walk out of that arena with 2 timeouts in your back pocket, which is what Nate did. Once when LeBaron was bringing the ball up, didn't give the ball to Mark for a chance to either take the game into overtime at minimum or win the game, and you don't put it in your All-American point guard's hands, top 5 point guard in the nation, because he just got announced to the Bob Cousy 5 finalists, and he doesn't have the ball in his hands. That's the first time you should have called a timeout. Second time you should have called timeout was it's Alabama fans. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about, oh, it's 4 seconds, all of these things. Frankly, if it got to 3 seconds and I'm Nate, I'm calling a timeout, right? Like I'm not gonna sit there and let the game be out of my hands because I want to sit with timeouts in my hands or in my pocket with 3.5 seconds left, right? Um, I think it's a learning experience for them, and I think Nate said as much in his post game or in his press conferences following that. But it's not a game that I've. It's not like the Missouri game or the Auburn game or the Ole Miss game that happened this year. I didn't come away from that game disappointed like I did in the team's performance. I came away pretty encouraged. Um, you went into the number one defense's house and put up 76, which is the most points that Nate's ever scored against a Tennessee team, which is encouraging that you can go up against the best defense in the country, still put up 76, and probably should have still won the game. Um, so you didn't win the game. It's unfortunate. You got to get a big game with Florida, I guess tonight when this podcast comes out, and then you close with the Iron Bowl basketball in Auburn Arena or in Neville Arena. So it's just kind of my thoughts. I'm not super upset about it. It's a little disappointing that you didn't win, but all in all, I'm not too particularly upset.
Bama dropped to a 2 seed with the loss, but and I saw a lot of people disappointed in that. But the good thing about it is that Alabama is in control of their own destiny right now. They really are. Playing and that being, it's going to be 2 tough opponents, obviously, but they really do control where their seeding is going to be. If they lose these next 2 games, you're probably a low 2. I don't think Bama really can drop below the 2. Maybe the top ranked 3 seed, but I still think that's a stretch. I think you win one of those games, you still have a strong argument for probably the lowest 1 seed. You win both, I think you're pretty much guaranteed a 1 seed. I mean, I have a really hard time believing you could beat the number 3 and the number 1 team in a week and not have a 1 seed. So Bama is still in control of where they get spotted. I think that the whole narrative, like you said, Christian, was a little bit. I think that was a little bit overstated as far as Bama. Whoever loses this game won't be a 1. So I like you said, or I know you said you weren't disappointed. I was disappointed just because it was Tennessee, and I know we all want to see Alabama beat Tennessee every time. But really, if it had been any other opponent, I probably, or outside of Auburn, obviously, I wouldn't have really cared to have lost in that fashion. So it was a really hard fought game, and I'm really. Marks the 3rd game in a row where we've seen market improvement. Yes, that one ended in a loss and not a W, but we've still seen this team grow so much over the past couple of weeks after losing those back-to-back games to Auburn and Missouri that it's kind of hard to walk away, with your head hanging. I really think that if they continue to build off of the progress they've shown these past couple of weeks, Florida and Auburn better look out, because this team really is, as what happens with Nate Oates teams, peaking at just the right time. So hopefully they're able to carry that momentum into the SC tournament and into the rest of March.
A lot of continued growth. And when I look at just the box score or the stats from the game against Tennessee, while I feel we played really well, there's nothing in the stats that makes me feel we did anything uncharacteristically well to the positive side. 17 to 26 from the free throw line, shoot about 38% from 3, Those are things that are pretty much in line. It's not like we wasted a game where we were 50% from the 3-point line or 100% from the free throw line, or only had 4 or 5 turnovers and got Tennessee to turn the ball over 14 or 15 times. I really just liked how we matched Tennessee's physicality. We out rebounded them by 11. I think we had 13 offensive rebounds and probably a few more offensive rebounds than we really needed to, just because some of those were looks that we had right at the rim that you would have liked to have put away the first time. But that's going to happen in a game with Tennessee that is so physical. When I break down the game against Tennessee or think about it, obviously you start with the last 30 seconds, but then I look at that and feel that that's just very correctable. The boxing out on the free throw line was a fluke play. The fact that Ziegler missed a free throw was kind of a fluke play, as it is anyway. The 5-second call, the not picking up Meshack. When I look at if I could break it down into 3 things as far as why we lost to Tennessee, I think it starts with Jordan Gainey. He had another great game against us. He had a great game against us in Knoxville last year. His 18 points were huge for them, but not only the 18 points, the 3 that he got right before halftime, where we had the ball with 16 seconds. Mark scores. Can argue maybe left a little bit too much time on the clock because they were obviously able to get it and get out and run, and Gainey gets the layup and converts a free throw with no time left. But then he got a lot of the focus as far as the inbounds on that last play. LeBaron was covering him, and nobody really ever picked up Meshack to just make it a little bit more difficult to bring the ball up or to give him more of a challenge when he shot that 3. So give Gainey a lot of credit. Tennessee scored 20 points, the last 3 being that 3 at the end right there, points off turnovers. They averaged, I think, 1.67 points per turnover that they generated against us, which is uncharacteristically high. We typically hold teams under a point per turnover at about 0.92, so that was different. And then we also only scored 12 points in the last 8 minutes of the game, which is a season low against SEC teams as well. So when I think about all those things, a lot of it can be explained because you're just playing Tennessee, which is a good defensive team. But a lot of it to me does feel very flukish as far as the last 30 seconds, as far as how the game played out. But I am really encouraged about this team. I know we were talking about it beforehand. I know Jeff Goodman said that he's really concerned about Alabama. Nate Oates hasn't figured this team out, and it's March 1st. Well, we're about to get in. We're about to, after these 2 games, technically going to have a week off as you get into the SEC tournament. And then depending how long we're in Nashville, could have another week off before our next game. So if Nate Oates hasn't figured it out with this team that is right there battling for number 1 seed in the country, and he figures it out over the next 2 weeks, everybody should be on notice. Like, I would be scared if I was everybody else thinking that Alabama hasn't figured it out yet, and yet they're still going to be a number 1 team, potentially, as far as it comes to brackets and things like that. You can look at Kansas, who Alabama was competing with early on in the preseason for being number 1 overall. Kansas isn't even in the top 25 right now. So I think this team is improving, like we continue to say. I like the fight that we showed on defense. I think we're improving there too. And one other flukish thing that I forgot to mention from the Tennessee game, I know it was on the broadcast. They mentioned Mark Sears was cramping up a little bit. So on those last 2 defensive possessions, you got LeBaron, you got Diabate, Stevenson, Cliff, and Grant. And not that I was in those huddles, but with Chaz Lanier, Gainey, and Ziegler, I feel like you probably would have put Mark Sears on the floor, even though his defense is continuing to improve, just to have another ball handler when you do secure a rebound, being able to probably guard one of those guards a little bit better. So he's off the floor because you don't want to have him as a liability with cramping up. In a normal situation, I think he's on the floor and really boost our defense in those situations. So unfortunate loss. And I'd be curious on y'all's guys' opinions about this too. Alabama has been talked about as being the 31st NBA franchise. And I know that throughout this season, there's been frustration as far as just putting teams away or lack of focus, but this team does continue to improve. And I've started to wonder, like, am I just looking at this team the wrong way this year? That we shouldn't be looking at this team as a college team, but looking at this team as they know the ultimate goal is to win a national championship, and the focus is just to continue to improve game in and game out. And as you get to basically the playoffs now in the NCAA tournament, I think this you have this team where, as an Alabama fan, you want them that defense is picking up, they're hitting shots. They're starting to show that attention to detail that we felt like was missing at times. It just seems like things are really starting to click like we thought they could click for this team. And you're still having to battle injuries throughout the year too. So I said it when we started. I'll reiterate it. I'm really excited about this week. We can go 0-2 this week, and I'd still be really excited because I do think things are really starting to come together for this Alabama basketball team.
Well, I think, they're already in such a much better spot than they were last year. And last year they made it to a Final Four. Considering they lost, I think, three of their last four. If you count the SEC tournament, they lost three of their last four games. I think they lost to Tennessee. They got just destroyed by Florida. Then they beat Arkansas, then lost Florida again. I think they actually lost four of their last six, I think, because I think they lost to Kentucky before that as well. So I would like to know if people were concerned if they had figured out by that point last year too. But that team went on to go to the Final Four. So, I think that if you have two really good quality wins like Bama has in the past week, and then you lose on the road to a number 5 Tennessee team by a buzzer beater in a game that you competed from buzzer to buzzer in, I don't really feel like that reflects the team doesn't have it, or the Oats doesn't have this team figured out. I think they just, they didn't even have an off game. They just had a game where it was unfortunate they were in the loss column at the end of it all. I really like where this team stands. Like you said, Charles, I think even if they go 0-2, that this week, I'm not disappointed. I think if anything, it gives them motivation heading into the tournament. So really, what we need to remember here is that this game against Florida pretty much decides, not officially, but it pretty much decides who's going to be the 2 seed in the SEC tournament. Not officially, there's still some things that could be finagled here and there, but more than likely, whoever wins on Wednesday night is going to be the 2 seed in the SEC tournament. So, because you would have, I think Florida would have to win, Bama would lose, but then Bama would still, I think, get the tiebreaker. But then there's Tennessee, Missouri, and all that fun stuff. So, I think that's an important thing to factor in. The good thing is that if you win, regardless of if you're a 2 seed in the SEC tournament, you're still pretty much, I think you are guaranteed a double bye with a win. So that's what Alabama should be fighting for right now, as well as, just prepping for the NCAA tournament. There's a lot on the line in this game, but I think really at the same time, I don't think we need to really blow it up bigger than it should be. I think that regardless of whether you go 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2, you really still, as long as this team keeps showing its incremental improvements, and as long as even if they're losing close games and performing really well, I think there's still a lot to be excited about this team. I think Nate Oates has figured out this team, and I think that can be evidenced over the past couple of weeks we've seen them here.
I hope he hasn't figured them out, because if he hasn't, I put my trust in Coach Oates. He will figure it out over that 2-week span. And now you're saying a team that's played itself to a number 1 seed, potentially at worst, I would think a really good number 2 seed in a bracket, has just figured it out and will be showing teams something that they hadn't seen in film all year. So I hope Jeff Goodman's right. I hope Coach Oates hasn't figured it out, because I feel pretty confident he and Coach Pannone and Coach Murphy and Coach Adams will figure it out. Real quick about the SEC tournament, just to simplify it a little bit. Yeah, any win for us this week or any Missouri loss will give us a double bye in the SEC tournament. And a win against Florida means we will not finish worse than 3rd as far as SEC. It'll be tiebreaker, but we will not be the 4 seed or anything like that. We will be definitely have the double bye and finish no worse than 3 for the SEC tournament with a win tomorrow against Florida.
Quick question. Would you prefer in the SEC tournament? Obviously, Auburn has the 1 seed locked, right? Would you rather Bama be a 2 or a 3 seed and be on the opposite bracket, or be a 4 seed and be in the same bracket as Auburn? So basically, hypothetically, would you rather Bama play Auburn potentially before the SEC championship game, or would you rather be the opposite bracket and potentially have a matchup with them in the championship game?
I'm about to tell you guys the ideal uh pool. Hold on. Blake Blake Byler sent it to me.
Hey,
This
shout
is
out to Blake.
yeah, shout out to Blake. This is the ideal Alabama basketball bracket. So in this scenario, Alabama would be the 3 seed. In their little region or whatever, the 14 and 11 would be Oklahoma and Georgia. The 6 would be Mississippi State, and then Alabama at 3. And then Tennessee would be the 2 seed. A&M would be the 7, and you have LSU and Kentucky as the 15 and 10s. And then the 1 is obviously Auburn facing the winner of South Carolina, Ole Miss, or Vandy. And then the 4 is Florida facing either Missouri, Texas, or Arkansas. That's the ideal scenario. And in order for that to happen, the rest of the games have to go chalk, and Alabama has to beat Florida. So if Alabama beats Florida in every single other game for the rest of the SEC schedule goes chalk, meaning that the favorites win, that will be your bracket. And I think that's the most ideal bracket for Alabama. One, because it's Auburn, Florida, most likely in the semifinals. Florida's already beaten Auburn. And two, you get another shot at Tennessee, which I think if a neutral site, it's not really going to be that neutral because it's in Nashville, but a more neutral site than, where Tennessee was playing. I think Alabama beats Tennessee again if they match up.
I mean,
So,
they did it. They did it just a few years ago in the semifinal, didn't they?
yeah.
Yeah. So
Our
in
two
Nashville.
SEC tournament championships under Nate Oates have started with victories over Mississippi State, so I like that too as a possibility. And I think at the end of the day, no matter what seed you get, you at least want to win one game in the SEC tournament, and not necessarily as it for me as it relates to seeding in the in-state tournament or anything like that. No college basketball team has won a national championship by losing the first game in their conference tournament. So just as far as good vibes and things like that, don't want to have to be competing against history to win a national championship if you do drop your first game in the SEC tournament. So whether it's the 2 or 3, that's what I would prefer, because I think we get get a better matchup there than possibly having to play Missouri in the 4 or 5 game, which, look, we can beat Missouri. Don't start down 12-0, would be a good start there. But I think to answer your question, Joey, I think I'd like to be on the 2-3 side, and see Auburn potentially in a championship game, then have to play what will be a top 15 opponent more than likely in the 4 or 5 game.
Well, here's another tidbit of history for you guys as far as Nate Oates in Alabama. Nate Oates has either lost in the first round or won the SEC championship or SEC tournament championship. There's not been a time when he's gotten to the semifinals and lost. We were doing a little bit of digging, and in the NCAA tournament, Nate Oates has only lost the first game of a weekend. He's never lost the second game of a weekend. Same could be said for the SEC tournament. He's never lost the second game of a weekend. He's only lost the first game. And then we went and looked at MTEs as well. And there's only been 2 times in Nate Oates' career at Alabama where he's lost the second game of an MTE. One was the 2023 Yukon team, which that team was just, it was a wagon. And then the other one was, I think, his first year. He lost the second game of MTE. So his track record, if he gets past the first round in any sort of, tournament setting is he's going to win his next game. Um, so I think for Alabama, if you draw Mississippi State, I think that's a favorable matchup. You've already beaten Mississippi State twice. Um, and then you most likely draw Tennessee, which I think Alabama can beat Tennessee. I know that people don't want to hear that after losing to them on Saturday, but what are the odds that you're up four again with 30 seconds left and you lose the game? Right? Like that's how Alabama was up 4 points with 30 seconds left. Like it just is it's just a fluke thing that happened. I will say for the Alabama fans that are saying the sky is falling because they're Alabama's not the one seed. Um, there's no saving you if you think that. If I'm being completely honest, like there's no like there go and I don't want to be mean, and I appreciate everyone that listens to Alabama, basketball coverage and goes to the games and is a fan of them and is passionate about them. But if you're upset about Alabama losing on the road to a top five team by three when you had a 4 point lead with 30 seconds left, and if you're upset about being a two seed in the NCAA tournament, stick to watching football, please. Please don't watch basketball anymore because for people that have been around this program and been around the Anthony Grant, end of Mark Gottfried, beginning of or Avery Johnson and Avery Johnson Jr. eras, like
David Hobbs.
like what the bad eras of Alabama basketball, like if you would have told any of us 6 years ago that Alabama would be on the cusp of getting back-to-back years, or no, it's 3 years, right? Where they had either a one or a two seed in the NCAA tournament. Brandon Miller, we were one seed. No, last year we were four seed. Sorry.
Yeah, last year
Last
we were
year we were
four
four
seed, I
seed.
think.
Two
But
of 3 years, three
yeah,
of six, really 3 of 5, where you're
yeah,
going to be a number one or a number two seed in your bracket for the NCAA tournament in your region.
exactly. I mean, I remember watching Avery Johnson coach teams at the end of, Grant's coach teams where I'm just trying to figure out how we can get to 20 wins, right? Like I'm like, if we get to 20 wins, we're in the tournament. We're in the tournament if we get 20 wins. And now we're at 23 wins. You're gonna be at least a two seed in the NCAA tournament, probably the top two seed if you can find a way. I mean, even if losing, you still might be like the sixth or the seventh overall seed. Like, go watch football if you're upset with that. Go stick to football. One loss in basketball doesn't end your season unless it's in the NCAA tournament.
We went 17 years from the first round game in 2004 to the first round game in 2021, where we were not, if we were playing in the NCAA tournament, which was few and far between, we were not designated the home team in our white jerseys. I know maybe not quite Whip Sanderson numbers yet. Haven't done an analysis of it. I would have to say, Nate Oates is pushing probably having more games where we are designated the home team in the NCAA tournament. If not close to Wimp, if he's already surpassed him, that's great. But this about this too is it not you're just not limping in to the NCAA tournament at no point except for the year that we were a 6 seed, and that was because we had just lost all the games anyway going into the NCAA tournament. But as far as a team like limping in just to get in a play-in game or a bubble team or anything like that, you're getting into the NCAA tournament as a locked team under Nate Oates, and you're doing that now for the 5th year in a row.
Would have been the sixth year if the COVID year, if COVID
Look,
didn't. We were gonna win the tournament.
yes, because we were about to play Tennessee, who we had lost. We were up double digits against them in Tuscaloosa. Like we would have beaten Tennessee. Well, first of all, we were in Nashville. So Nashville, Nate would have beaten Tennessee. Kentucky's point guard had just left the team. So we would have beaten them in the second round. can't remember the rest of the bracket, but we had played everybody else really tough.
I think Auburn was the number one team that year in the SEC.
Yeah, I just talked about we would make it if what our run would have been, and that we'd be sitting here talking. If not for COVID, we'd be talking about
Yeah.
NATO. Nate Oates getting us into the NCAA tournament for the sixth year in a row.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I again, we talk about all of this and it's just so frustrating sometimes because like uh, people want to be this team that is winning national championships every single year, right? And I want that too. Like I 100% like if we could win a national championship every year, I'd be so happy. If we can win an SEC championship, I'd be so happy. But that's just not the nature of college basketball. And um especially when you're turning the roster over so much as other teams like Alabama does it year in and year out. You're switching 8 or 9 guys every single season that you're adding on. The like consistency level of that of like football is not the same, right? Like football, you're not going to lose 70% of your roster every single season like you do in basketball. Um, and the fact that we're staying competitive, staying in that the top 4 seeds, the top 2 seeds, top 1 seed, like that we're doing all of this in this era of college basketball, it just shows you the type of coach that we have. And it's quite frustrating when fans say that, and then especially when like play when writers like Jeff Goodman saying Nate Oates hasn't figured out this team. If Nate Oates hasn't figured out this team, like Charles said, then one, I don't know what he's doing at Alabama if he's not figured out a team by March 1st, right? Like he's a head coach. He's obviously figured out the right buttons to push for this team. Two, I think that's a very large overreaction over losing on a buzzer beater to Tennessee when they're the fifth ranked team on the road. When you just got off of beating Mississippi State, you just beat Kentucky. Like you didn't say those things when Alabama was bulldozing Mississippi State. What was it by like 38 points or something like that? You didn't say that then, right? Why are you saying it now? Like, it's because Alabama lost and you need to have clicks. Maybe that's it. You know, um, I just think it's utterly ridiculous the type of narratives that fans and then especially like media is putting out there. I get it. We're not Auburn. We're not as good as Auburn. Great. Who cares? Just because they're our rival doesn't mean that we have to compare ourselves to them. We're comparing ourselves to a standard that NATO's has put set forth, you know, for us. Not any other team in the country, not Auburn, not Duke, not Tennessee, not Florida. We're comparing ourselves to the success and the values that NATO's has set for this program. And frankly, you know what Auburn, Duke, Tennessee, Florida don't have? A Final Four last year. Alabama does. So I think I'm going to trust Nate Oates and the coaching staff on that one. So sorry, that was a little.
Sometimes I wish my house was made of brick so I could just get up and run through the wall after you get done talking.
All right.
Goodness.
The wind may knock it down for you from what it sounds like outside.
That's fair. That is fair. For those of you that don't know, it is storming really bad at my house right now.
For
So
those of you who don't know, our recording stopped, and not because of Joey or Charles, but because of my safe house in Alabama or in Charlotte decided that the internet stopped working. Um, so if you hear some
uh,
choppiness in this recording, I apologize because my internet stopped working. Well, now I'm off my soapbox. Sorry, I had to get on a rant because I didn't get to say all of this on the space, right? Because I have to be the
mhm.
voice of reason on space. I can't be going on rants like this. But um, now that that's passed, Charles? What do we got for Florida? What's this game look like?
Yeah, so I'll talk about Florida first, and then I do want to talk about just the senior night festivities afterwards. But look, Florida has been a very good team throughout this entire year. They only sit with 4 SEC conference losses, the only team in conference play to beat Auburn right now, and did it on the road. There's a lot of similarities to Alabama, where you're led by Walter Clayton Jr., a guy who transferred back into Florida, similar to Mark Sears when he came to Alabama. They've got other good guards in Elijah Martin and Will Richard. They got some good bigs in Thomas Haw and Alex Condon. They've got Ruben Chinalu, who's from Nigeria, which I thought was interesting. Cliff is from, make sure I say this right. Cliff is from Benin City, Nigeria. Ruben's from Enugu, Nigeria. They're 154 miles away and a 4.5 hour drive. So there's your Nigerian geography for you for the day. But I think there's a lot of similarities to both teams. What I'm most interested about in this game, and when we talk about just improvement and seeing how this team is growing, when we played Florida last year, we did not really adjust to how Florida defended us in all 3 games. If Florida doesn't let Sam Walters get loose on 2 or 3 possessions, we may be sitting last year being 0-3 against Florida. So I'm very interested to see the game plan that we put together, how Coach Pannone puts together an offensive game plan, because I do think Florida will still defend us similarly to last year, trying to run us off the 3-point line, not help on drives to the basket. We're built obviously better to finish at the rim and to not have to do it on straight line drives or drives from the wing, but to back guys down. So that when I look at this game tomorrow, I'm just really interested to see how we attack Florida offensively. And then 2, can we bring the same defensive effort and be locked into the game plan similarly to how we did against Tennessee, but Florida being a much better offensive team than Tennessee is.
Joey, any thoughts on Florida?
Sorry, got something in my throat, so I keep coughing and muted. No, Charles's last point was something I was going to say. My one concern is that obviously Florida's a good team, but like if I had to pick a big thing to be concerned about, I'd be concerned about potential whiplash as far as how different this team is from Tennessee. This team, sorry about my throat. This team is a really, really strong offensive team. Don't get me wrong, they have a decent defense too, but offensively, that's where their primary skill set is. Walter Clayton's obviously having a fantastic year. He's averaging almost 17 points a game. Martin, Richard, Condon, they're all having really solid years. So my one concern would be just the whiplash. The good thing is that they're playing at home. You got to kind of help, think that's going to give Alabama at least a little bit of not necessarily an advantage, but it's going to give them a little bit better chance. And so I think this is another thing. One way that they are similar to Tennessee is that they're very physical. And so that's once again, we were talking earlier about incremental improvements and improving over time. The stuff that they did right in the Tennessee game is also stuff that's going to be very effective against Florida. The lockdown defense, the physical presence under the basket, the really, really tight perimeter defense that Alabama was able to play really in the past couple of games. So I'm not going to say that Alabama is going to win this game, but I think that Alabama does have a decent shot at it. I really do like their odds, especially with it being senior night. I think that we could be just as much talking about this game being a win next week as we could it being a loss. I really do like our odds, and I think it'd be a great way to see some of these really good players like, Sears and Grant and all the others go out on a really good note, and how much just they really have contributed to the atmosphere in Coleman over these past few years.
Yeah, I think for anyone that's able to go to the games, and I know that like the weather's been bad, and
should be cleared up by tomorrow night, everybody.
well, you guys need to watch out. One of my buddies from Birmingham said he just lost power, so I think you guys might be on the cusp of losing power here soon. Hopefully not.
My night's about to get a lot more busy.
Yeah. But like go support these guys. Nate quoted something about Mark Sears having 79 wins at home. I don't think that that's not true. That he doesn't have Mark Sears doesn't have 79 wins at home. Um,
Maybe 79 wins at home over the course of his career, like including Ohio, but that would
yeah,
be, I don't think that's possible with his time at Bama, I don't think.
no, it's not. It's not. Um, because if Alabama plays 31 games, 16 of them, let's say hypothetically, are at home, over the course of 3 years, that's what, like 58, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's
And
the math.
we don't have any 30-year-olds like other teams in the SEC do on our
Yeah.
roster. So
Um, but needless to say, the point being is like go support these guys. Grant Nelson's listed as questionable for this game. I think he's going to play. That kind of does um, tell me that he has been dealing with some injuries. Um, I'm scared, Charles, that maybe they're listening to this podcast because every single time we mention someone as coming up as an injury, the next thing on the injury report is that person's getting listed as on the injury report. So maybe your theory that they're listening to the podcast might be right. Um,
Nato says was looking up from his notepad right now, being like, "Oh God, I got to pick somebody
I'm
else."
gonna pick some.
Well, since they're listening to the podcast, let me talk about how great Mark Sears has been for this program ever since he uh, arrived in Tuscaloosa, and I'm being 100% serious about that. I know I've been hard on Mark this year, and at times things have probably not gone the way that Mark has wanted them to this year. But this is a guy who has come in, was on a team that had a number one overall seed at Alabama, first time ever in school history. He was a second team All SEC player that year. He takes the reins last year, sets the program record for most points scored in a single season. Comes the first player in the last 31 years to have 795 points, 150 rebounds, 145 assists, and 95 three-pointers in a single season. He was the West Region All-Tournament team. He was the most outstanding player, and of course, got Alabama with his teammates too, but got Alabama to their first Final Four ever. He was a second team All-American last year, and then comes into this year with a ton of expectations, a ton of hype on any national magazine. He's probably one of those guys that's gracing the cover with it. He's probably going to end up as a first team All-American, and obviously a first team All SEC player. His defense has been improving. I think his leadership has been improving. So I hope we take care of business and that there's an opportunity to give him a curtain call before the game ends. But as y'all just said, regardless of winning or losing, he deserves the opportunity to be recognized by everybody who shows up wearing crimson and white tomorrow night for his senior day festivities. Another guy that I do want to highlight too is Grant Nelson, because I think Grant Nelson at times has gotten an unfair criticism because he's been a guy that's had to play out of position. He's had to play through injuries, it seems like, all 2 years that he's been at Alabama. And all he's done has been on teams that have, been setting records and creating history at Alabama. So, being questionable, hopefully he's able to go. And he has an opportunity to have a great game, which I do think if Grant can go, going up against Florida's bigs, I think he's got some advantages there that similar to games where he's played against a Kentucky or a North Carolina where he's had a lot of success. But just another guy that has put in the work. He's been doubted. I feel he was doubted a ton last year, but came in the NCAA tournament, stepped up when we needed to throughout last year as far as having to play the five when he's really a four. And I'm just really appreciative of his efforts. And you know what? I don't care what barbecue sauce he is. I'll take him, every time wearing crimson and white for us. So I hope, and look, Chris Youngblood and Cliff will obviously be recognized too as seniors, but those two guys and Mark Sears and Grant Nelson um, deserve a lot of praise just for what they've done at their time at Alabama and helping take this program to the next level.
I think when we look, when we, decade, 2 decades from now, when we're looking back at the beginning years, because these are still, I know it feels like Oates has been there here for a while now, but these are still hopefully the beginning years of Oates being here. Um, I think there are going to be several players that people look back on that were instrumental in the development of the culture and the development of the changes at Alabama. I think first and foremost, you have to think of Herb Jones, which he didn't even recruit there, but Herb Jones had such a massive impact during his time in establishing that culture. I know people are going to think it's a controversial take, but I think Javon Quinley is also up there. I know he kind of left a rough taste in people's mouths, but he was very instrumental in establishing the culture that Oates had at Alabama. Brandon Miller as well, but Brandon Miller was one and done. But Mark Sears is absolutely on that list alongside those other players. The fact that he was able to come in and really, I know people get frustrated with him from time to time, but there have been few players at Alabama under Nate Oates where that didn't do that. Let me rephrase that. There have been few players at Alabama under Nate Oates that didn't live up, that lived up as well as Mark Sears has, as far as he's done his job week in and week out. Yes, he has some frustrating games from time to time, but just overall, his full body of work is really almost second to none. He goes out every game, gives it his all. How often do you see players that are point guards that are one of the biggest offensive scorers that are also diving for loose balls and are also, drawing charges and doing a lot of crazy things that you normally wouldn't see for somebody, especially somebody his size and the aggressiveness that he plays with sometimes. I just think that Mark Sears will absolutely have a legacy here. And I think that doesn't really need to be said. But when people look back on the first Oates teams in his first 5 or 6 years, I think Mark Sears will absolutely be one of, if not the top player that helped build the blue collar basketball that we have here and we've been enjoying these past few years.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, or we've previously talked a lot about legacy. Um, and one thing that's bothered me a lot in this day and age of college basketball and college athletics in general is guys leave, right? Like, especially in basketball, where you can have guys that are one and dones. And I'm not upset with anyone that's one and done. Like Noah Clowney leaving, that's great. Brandon Miller leaving, that's great. Josh Primo, all of these guys that were one and done players for Alabama at the time, like that's great. But it's not often that you have guys that stick around for 3 years anymore on a team. I mean, you go look at Caleb Love, right? Like he's one of the better players for North Carolina, and I think after like 2 or 3 years, I think it was 3 years, he transfers to Arizona, right? You don't have these guys that are in the program for this long as much as Mark Sears was. And to be a guy that comes from Muscle Shoals, that grew up an Alabama fan, that wanted to play at Alabama, was under recruited, um, and to have the opportunity that he had to come and lead Alabama the way he has over the past 3 years speaks volumes to his character, speaks volumes to his family and his upbringing, and then speaks volumes to the work ethic that he has to get to the heights that he is. I mean, if you would have probably told him coming out of high school that he was going to be a top five finalist for Bob Cousy, lead Alabama to a Final Four, have him on the cusp of another 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, he probably thinks that you're crazy talking like that. But like that's what he's done. Um, and much like Charles, I've been hard on Mark this year especially. But that's because he's so good of a player that my expectations for him are that of higher than than any player that I think had at Alabama before. Maybe Brandon Miller would be another guy that I'd have those types of expectations for. And then on the flip side of that, you talk about Grant Nelson. Grant Nelson's a guy that, like Charles said, he's been dealing with injuries. I mean, heck, he had surgeries in the offseason to deal with injuries. He's been dealing with injuries this season. He's been playing out of position. Um, and he's always available. Like he's never not going to go out and give 110% of his effort. Now, does he frustrate me at times with his offensive game? Yeah. But again, that's because I have high expectations for him. Um, Cliff Amori, Chris Youngblood, these guys are guys that came in and bought into the Nate Oates system. I know that people have been frustrated with Cliff because they thought that he was going to be a player that maybe is better than what he is now. Um, but he comes in, he buys in, he does exactly what he's asked to do, and I think he's improving game over game. I know he didn't have a good game versus Tennessee, but I think he's getting better every single game. Chris Youngblood finally looks the part of what we kind of expected him to look like. Again, I know he had a bad game versus Tennessee. Take that game out of consideration. He had what, 20 something, 28 points or something versus Mississippi State? Or was it 22 point? I can't remember, 27, some ridiculous number where he was shooting like 7 of 10 from the floor. Something crazy like that. But like these four guys are guys that have given their blood, sweat, and tears to this program this year, and I'm so thankful that they were on the roster. Um, this season, and I wish them nothing but success. Some additional news out of Senior Day festivities. It sounds like Latrell Wrightsell and Houston Millette are going to get medical red shirts because they're not participating in the Senior Day festivities. And Nate said that Clark believes that they'll both. There's no problems with that. It sounds like both of them are going to come back, or at least I know Latrell sounds like he's coming back. Houston Millette is to be determined, but my expectation as of now would be he's coming back. But um, for next year's roster, that's such a huge pickup. I mean, like you don't need to go get another Latrell Wrightsell from the portal. You got him on your team next year. So um, just go out and give those guys support, regardless of the result tomorrow night, right? Like they're doing the post game festivities after the game, or they're doing the festivities, Senior Day festivities after the game, not before. Like I know people like to leave because of traffic if Alabama starts losing. Like stay around, stick around. I think Charles is suiting up for the team with his jersey. Um, I'm waiting for the headband to come out. But go out and support and show these guys love because they deserve it more than anyone. Because we're just a couple or a few, three of us are just guys on a podcast sitting at a desk talking. We're not the ones doing the work, putting in the hours, and putting on a show for everybody else. So, um, Charles, you want to go quickly over the Auburn game? I know we've already previously touched on them.
Yeah. Uh, look, it's a big game because it's an in-state game. It would have been cool if this had had a little bit more into it as far as SEC championship race and all that. But that is what it is. I said, I said several weeks ago, and then I flipped it to where I thought both teams would win their home games. But previously, I'd said I thought both teams would win on the road because I think the hype around these games for the home fans is so high that it could affect the play of the home team. And Auburn is a team that definitely feeds off of emotion. But I feel in a game like this where they're going to want to cut down the nets after the game. Like if Alabama just hangs around through the first media timeout, through halftime, like I think Auburn fans want to put it on us. And I don't think this Alabama team is just going to sit there and allow Auburn to put it on us. Obviously, we need to get off to a good start, better than a 9-0 start than we did a couple weeks ago. And this will be a game that is, again, just about continued growth, continued improvement. Making sure that you don't go under screens, making sure that you get to shooters, making sure that the offense flows a lot better than what it did the first time. I think we had a season low in assists against Auburn the first time. This has been one of the best teams relates to sharing the ball and hitting guys for open shots and things like that. So it's a tough place to play. It's tough because it's a small gym and they pack everybody on top of each other and all that. And rah rah, our ticket prices are high. Look, I give it to them. There's only so few things that Auburn fans can hang their hat on. That's fine. I'll give that to you. Um, but again, for our team, I just want us to continue to be growing, continue to be doing the right things. And in a game like this, making sure that, our emotions are in check. We already have seen what Chad Baker Mazzara will do, not only against Yale, but as he, hit Chris Youngblood in the face at the end of the game in Tuscaloosa. I just, we got a lot more to play for. And so I just want us to continue to be growing, get the offense running well against a good team. But it would not hurt my feelings if we spoil their party on Saturday either.
Yeah, and I mean Auburn's in a dogfight right now. So A&M's up 8 on them right now. So um I would love to beat Auburn. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I've been saying I would. It doesn't matter if we go 0-2 or whatever, right? Like I'd love to beat Auburn, but at the end of the day, I think I said this before we started recording. There's no reason for if you're Alabama to make this game bigger than what it is, right? Like there's no reason to. You're not playing for anything besides pride on the front of your jersey, if I'm being honest. Um, Like you're not going to be SEC champion. It's not going to really change your seeding that much. Maybe you sneak into the third overall seed instead of the fourth overall seed. Like I'm pretty sure Duke and Auburn are locked in at the 1 and 2 seeds, if I'm being completely honest. Like all you're playing for is pride on the front of your jersey. And I know that there was a question today. Nate was asking, or Nate got asked about their whole celebration, when we lost to Tennessee. One, I don't really like that question. Like, of course, Auburn's going to celebrate because they won the SEC championship outright. Like, of course, that's going to be the celebration. And then two, like, it's their rival. Of course, they're going to celebrate. We don't like them. We don't like them. They don't like us. That's how it goes. But like you said, Charles, it would be so sweet because they're going to cut down the nets regardless of whether or not they win or lose on Saturday, right? Because that's their first home game since they won outright. But it would be sweet to send the Auburn fans home with a sour taste in their mouth because Alabama comes in and beats them on spoiling their senior night too. Because like that Saturday's Auburn senior night. Um, so that'd be nice. But I'm not going in expecting a win. I'm not going in. I just want Alabama to continue to compete and improve. And if they can continue to do that, even like we've said, if they go 0-2, but they're showing signs of improvement and signs of competing, I'm happy. So, Joey, any thoughts on Auburn?
No, I mean none that wouldn't be repeating what y'all have said. Obviously, it'd be great to close out the season with a win, especially in Neville Arena. But at the end of the day, it means a lot as far as bragging rights. But when it comes to seeding, and especially if we win over Florida, it doesn't necessarily mean that much in the long run. So I don't. I'm not. I'm gonna remain quiet just because I don't want to repeat too much. But hopefully get the win. But I'm not going to be crying until our next game if we get an L.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't know the women's bracket, right?
I've got it in front of me. We
Okay.
don't know who our opponent is yet, but we did get the 6th seed in the SEC women's tournament. So our game will be the late game on Thursday of this week
And then
against
who are we
against
facing?
the winner of Auburn and Florida. We beat Florida twice this year. I only played Auburn once at home, beat them recently. So I like our chances in that game. And then after winning on Thursday night, would play, not play Florida, would play LSU again. LSU got the number 3 seed, and LSU is going to be without Flasia Johnson, their number 1 overall scorer. She's sitting out the SEC tournament. So there's an opportunity to get a big win there and potentially get into the semifinals. And I would think a win, 2 wins in the SEC tournament, one over LSU as well, would be sufficient enough to secure hosting a regional, hosting the first and second round in Tuscaloosa, which would be absolutely awesome, not only for this team, but for the Alabama women's program as well. So I have to admit, out of all the basketball games that I've watched this year, men's and women's, I think the most invested I've been watching a game had to be that Alabama LSU women's game last week. And it was really fun to see the support that they got on X, on Twitter after the game, that so many people were watching it. It was great to see them get to celebrate afterwards too, and how much it meant to them. And we've been a team that really rely on, our starters to play a lot of minutes and to do a lot of work. But I thought Diana Collins, I thought Azuma off the bench when Essence Cody had to go out with cramps for a little bit, gave great minutes when Aaliyah Nye fouled out, which I'll give credit to Roger Hoover. He's the one who tweeted it out. But Aaliyah Nye not being first or second team All SEC is an absolute joke. Like it's just an absolute joke. It's an absolute travesty. She has been phenomenal, not only this year, but her entire Alabama career. So I expect her to be hot Thursday night. I expect her to be hot again on Friday night, knocking down threes. I mean, before she fouled out, she was unconscious against LSU. It was awesome to watch. So, excited for them this week. Have to be honest, as we know, when you got South Carolina and Texas in this conference, and they're both going to be number 1 seeds, I wouldn't count us out, but those are going to be tough games, to win a semifinal game and to win a championship game, potentially for the SEC women's tournament. But I really feel like if you win 2 games, you're going to secure yourself a 4 seed in some region, and that's going to be hosting first and second round games in Tuscaloosa. And then hopefully we could get a favor from the NCAA as well and send the girls for their Sweet 16 Elite 8 games to Birmingham and not have to go out west. But it's been really fun to watch them and see the success that they've had, and good luck to them this week in Greenville as they tip it off on Thursday night against either Auburn or Florida.
Yeah, the LSU game, I was at dinner watching the game. Sam's like, it's Thursday. Why are you watching basketball? I was like, the women's team is playing. No, sorry, I wasn't at dinner. I was at a bar in Charleston, sitting there watching the LSU game at a table at a bar in Charleston. She's like, "What are you doing?" And then Sam starts rooting for Alabama too, and so it's like we're huddled around the phone watching it at a bar in Charleston. Like, um, it's just it's amazing what Chrissy Curry's done for that program, and the fact that like they're compete and you talk about Alabama or the women's team, with Texas and South Carolina, how it's going to be tough. Alabama played South Carolina extremely tough in Tuscaloosa. I know that South Carolina is going to have a home court advantage essentially because they are playing I think they're playing in Greenville, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, that's South Carolina country all day. There's going to be a lot of South Carolina fans there at the game. Um, but it's not to say that Alabama can't do it and maybe do something miraculous, pull off an upset. But just excited for them. Hopefully they can get a 4 seed. And I know that LSU win goes a long way in determining that. So credit to them. But super excited to watch them this week. When the men's team isn't playing on Wednesday, then you immediately can go into Thursday. Hopefully Thursday, Friday, you get your basketball fix with the women's team, and then into the Saturday, hopefully we have a doubleheader basketball of the men's and women's team. But outside of that,
I'll say
baseball.
one last thing about the Alabama LSU women's game. For anybody that complains about officiating for our men's games, watch one women's basketball game, and then you just have to be like, at least it's not that bad. Sorry,
That
I
flagrant
just had to say that.
that flagrant on Sarah Ashley Barker was crazy.
If that play happens in the first, second, or third quarter, and the LSU player is not fouling out, I don't think there's any way they call that a flagrant foul. I think the SEC offices took into account the moment and the time left in the game and felt that they had to call an intentional foul.
Yeah.
It was a basketball move. Her arms never left her body.
And the girl was in the cylinder,
Yep.
and which is why she got hit in the face, which is
Yep.
an illegal guarding position. Anyway, that's a different thing. In other Alabama athletics news, Alabama baseball picked up an 11-1 win over Jacksonville State at Jacksonville State today. Really rough conditions for Alabama as far as like the winds were blowing in. So a lot of I think Rick, I think his name's Rick Penley. I might have his name wrong. Um, he said that Alabama had about 5 home runs that should have been home runs that just the wind just knocked them down. But they're 13-0 on the season. I'm not going to talk about baseball as I am not qualified, and nor do I know the sport well enough to talk about it. But you can listen to any baseball information and takes that you want on our Weekly Joe podcast that we just released yesterday with Roger Patrick Myers, Drew Champlin, Griff Smith. I think Ryan Phillips joined us, Paul Graham, and then normally Megan Dennis also joins that as well. But you can check that out on our multitude of content platforms that we do have. But um, if we don't have anything, we'll have a post game space following the Florida game. And then we'll have a post game space following the Auburn game, regardless of result, just so we can talk about like the SEC tournament, different things like that, shaking out. And then we'll have our SEC tournament preview next week. But if you guys don't have anything else, I think we're good to sign off. All right.
Good to go.
We will talk again, I guess, later tonight. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
But